Hey guys, what's up? This is Jeremy with Epic Fox Battlegrounds, and thanks for joining me tonight. I'm going to be doing a review of a game this evening, and that is Bellis Antiquitatis, otherwise known as DBA. And this is the newest version, version 3.0, and it is a quick play war game set of rules with army lists for ancient and medieval battles. And this is, like I said, a review. It is my first game review. And just to be upfront, I will not do a game review unless I have acquired at minimal 250 hours of playtime with that game. And unless I just can't stand the game that much to where I can't make that cutoff, I'll be sure to let you know when that happens, if it happens. But I did want to make my first game review a positive one, so I wanted it to be a game that I'm passionate about and not a negative review. So I have chosen this, and one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about it is because it spans such an immense time frame, basically from the beginning of time up until the implementation and use of the earliest firearms. So it's like I said, a ridiculous time frame. In the early days, a lot of people questioned whether or not that was even possible to represent with one set of rules, especially one set of rules that's only 29 pages long with examples of play. So, but over time, it's proven itself, and it has a tremendous following in the miniature wargaming community, and large tournament plays, and a lot of fun all around. It's a quick play game, like I said, so a battle can be done in a little bit over an hour if you guys know what you're doing, and in a utter, complete victory, probably less than an hour. I have had battles go very quick before, actually. So, um, this game, like I said, this is the newest version, and it was, designed by the Barkers. And there's a term that you might know about if you're into miniature wargaming. It's called Barkerese. And because these rules are not the clearest, but there is a tremendous amount of online support and community for this game that have clarified these rules, and you can find help and multiple variants all over. So the game itself is rather abstract, so some of you not bite on that, but to me it works out wonderfully, especially to ease into miniature wargaming if you're not into that sort of thing because it requires a low count of miniatures. The ease of painting is much better, and DBA usually is represented by 15 millimeter miniatures, which are even cheaper and easier to paint. Excuse me. So it's a good introduction to get yourself into miniature wargaming as well. Um, it is represented by the armies, which would include 12 elements or units on each side, and some army lists only contain 12 specific elements that you have to take. Others have options, and in very specific ways you can take those options. Some are more liberal, but all the armies lists vary, and they're all done historic. Well, for the most part, historically done. Some people have questioned the legitimacy of some of the information, but that's all right. I'm no historian, so it's very entertaining to read through this book and the army lists. I will tell you that. And but anyway, the first page opens up with the introduction. It tells you about some of the history and how the game was developed, and then it gets into telling you about the troop definitions and the playing area and all sorts of different things. So troops are, defined by certain basing methods and other visual standards. So the troop types you're going to have are elephants, knights, cavalry, light horse, scythe chariots, camelry, excuse me, spears, pikes, blades, auxiliary, psiloi, bows, warband, hordes, artillery, and war wagons. So it introduces you to all those and explains, about them, like between if they can have solid options, which is four spearmen, like I was telling you, or four blades, or quick options, which would be three. And then over here you have your first table, and it tells you the troop type and the DBA abbreviation for that troop type for when you're reading through the rules or for the army list. And then you have DBM list codes, which DBM is another game for DBA. So if you're interested in getting out of that smaller abstraction and into the larger scales, there is a game DBMM which allows you to do that and have much larger armies on the field. And then it tells you, based on the scale figure you're using, the base depths that you will mount your soldiers on. And these are going to be done, my 15 millimeters are all based on 40 millimeter bases, and that's the 40 millimeter wide bases, and that's the DBA standard basing. And you will find, if you're into miniature wargaming, that if you base them that way, the majority of other war games you can use your DBA armies in, because you can combine the 40 millimeter bases into the other unit types for other war games, and a lot of those games use 80 millimeter wide bases, 120 millimeter wide bases. So if you stick to the 40 millimeter wide bases, you'll find you're on a pretty good path to play a lot of other rule sets. And I do use my DBA armies for a lot of other rule sets. Sword and spears is one that I use them for a lot, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So um, anyway, with the DBA armies represented by 12 elements, like I told you, here's the first table explaining the base depth. Now, the base depth, like I was telling you, for example, infantry, the spearmen in the previous versions were mounted on, 15 millimeter, and that way, in case they had 3 men, as for a quick spearman, you could tell the difference from Auxilia, which would also have 3 men who may look like spearmen as well. And so the spearmen were mounted on 20 millimeter wide bases, or deep bases, excuse me. And New Age wargamers have kind of disregarded that, and they mount all their infantry on 20 millimeter deep bases and 40 millimeter wide bases for the entire army across. So, and now the new rules in this version 3.0, you can see they have given in and put those in there as an option, that you can now mount those units on 15 or 20 millimeter deep bases. So that's one difference from the previous versions, if you may be coming here as an experienced DBA player. And then it explains to you the battlefield terrain. And as a gamer of DBA, if you have an army, you're expected to be able to supply the battlefield for that army. And it tells you in the army list what kind of battlefield or homeland you're on. And if you're the defender in a battle, you would use your homeland, and it tells you what kind of terrain types are going to be on that map as well. And then, of course, all armies are going to supply their own camp, which even travels with them, especially travels with them if they're on the attack. And then going into this, it tells you the sequence of play and some other moving information, crossing a river. I'm not going to really get into the rules here too much, other than tell you how the combat works. Movement, you'll find, is done by base depth, or excuse me, base width, and that's why all must be uniform, because there's a lot of rules involving that match up, line up units for specific kind. That way it eases, simplifies combat. You're not comparing this unit's being attacked by this one, that one, this one's attacking this one, dot, 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 dot. There's none of that. It simplifies a lot of it. There's very specific rules for flanking units, etc. So we're already into the examples of play. We're already done with the rules. We're into interpenetration and examples of play, and you're going on and on. So by the time you hit page 31, you're already into the army list. The combat works, like I said, is to give historical results as quickly as possible. So you're rolling based off what unit type. Each unit type is more powerful compared to certain other unit types, are vulnerable to others. So the die rolls reflect that and those odds. So you can have push and pull battles that are just pushing back and forth. The lines are shifting. It really reflects the battlefield to me quite well. And there's chain of command system, but all done in a very simplified manner. Like I said, it's very intriguing. This game was very intriguing to me. I had been in miniature wargaming for a long time and didn't know about this game. It surprised me, and I'm in the middle of a massive rebasing project, have been for years, and they've all been rebasing to DBA standards. So here you start with the army list, and you start off with the early Sumerian and 3000 BC, and you move on to early Egyptian, Nubian, and these are all early ancient civilizations, and you move in everything you can think of is in these books. By the way, there's 4 books, so this army is 119. This army Syrio-Canaanite is 120, and so if you see somebody say, "Well, I have Army 213," they're talking about Army 13 from Book 2. There's 4 books in this army list, so you keep on going, and up here you're getting into the ancient Indians, and then you have the New Kingdom Egyptians, just the Babylonians, whole bunch of stuff, Hittites. Then you have ancient Chinese in here, yeah, later Hebrew, early Hebrew, Italian hill tribes. Then you're getting into the Hoplite Greek, the early Thracians, uh, early Vietnamese, the ancient Vietnamese, and there's multiple different types. There's 4 different army lists for early Vietnamese, and that's not even, there's multiple options within each of those army lists. So they're covering is a tremendous amount of information in these books, and they all have descriptions. Like I said, historical accuracy, I'm not going to get into that, but I find this book very entertaining. Right here, we're finishing up earlier Archimedes Persian with finishing up book 1, and then we're moving on to book 2, which is the classical period, 500 BC to 476 AD. So you're going to be getting into the Republican Indian era and the later Hoplite Greek, and then moving down, I'll just take big sections. You're moving on to the successors, and then the Alexander and everything else, and I can go on and on and on. So you can just take a look as I'm flipping through these pages. You may not be able to see it, and then we're still in book 2 here, later Judean, ancient British, early Imperial Roman, and you keep on going, and eventually we'll hit book 3. And book 3 is, and then the last army in book 2 is a sub-Roman British. And the first book in section 3 is going to be your early Slav. So, and then you have Italian Ostrogothic down there, Christian Nubian, Avar, Hindu Indian, early Bulgar, more Chinese, Welsh. We're moving up into the Dark Ages here, Middle Anglo-Saxon, Arab conquest, Andalusian. So I'm trying to find. Oh well, I was trying to find something in particular, but we'll come across it eventually. So one army that I'm going to show you here in just a second is from Army 3, Book 352, which is West Frankish and Norman. I do have a Norman army that I'll show you in just a moment. There's a composition for it, and it tells you its historical allies, historical enemies, your army options, and like I said, the description. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at book 4, and then we will take a look at an example, few example elements. And here's book 4, and that is the High Medieval period from 1071 AD to 1520 AD. So that's going to cover all your periods in there. Up to 1520 AD is what DBA targets, and it's a huge time frame. So that being all said, I'm going to take this camera off really quickly. Pardon me. And I'm going to show you, if I can get the light down here, which I will. Let's get the light down there. I'll get this into focus. This is going to be a unit of DBA spearmen, and you can see they're painted by me and based by me. So they're a good looking army. This is by Donington Miniatures Army. And then we're going to have a unit of light horse, and light horse are always going to be based 2 to a base. And they're like cavalry, so they have all the traits that you would expect from light cavalry. And then you're going to have Siloi, and Siloi are your skirmishing type that can benefit from interpenetration and such, and they're your skirmisher types. So these Norman bowmen could be a unit of bowmen if there was 3 on there, which they can field bowmen in such a manner. So Siloi could be anything from Velites in the Roman army to the Peltas and as a Greek army. So, like I said, the abstraction is done in such a manner that it might turn off some players initially, but to me, it's done rather well. I felt like I was turned off in the beginning as well. Here's a unit of Blade, Norman Blade, that can be fielded as an option, and that unit is custom by me, so it's made as a command unit. You can see it has a musician and a standard with them, but the stats are no different from a normal unit. I just put it in there as to be good show, and to highlight my army more and make it stand out. So that's them. Better light, better sunlight. They look, maybe you'll see some battle reports where I'll have good lighting because I have a game table right in the middle of a morning window that gets sun the first half of the day, so you'll be able to see them here pretty good soon enough, because I do like this game and I will do some battle reports. But that's a unit of knights right there, and that's going to make up the majority of a Norman army, is going to be their knights. um, so there is the general unit, and the general unit is usually going to be signified by a white horse or a red cape or something like that, something general like high status marker. As long as your opponent knows very specifically what your general unit is, shouldn't have any sort of problems. And here's just one more unit of knights. This isn't my full Norman army. I think the army's 18 total elements, including all options. I have it all. I still need to paint up the 3 bows. So once I do that, I'll do a full highlight on this army. This has been about a year-long project. This is a Norman army, a Donington miniature army, kind of more an advanced figure. So I'll get into that with other. I'll even do some miniature reviews here in the very near future as well. I got a whole bunch of manufacturers and producers of many different miniatures. So I also love the scenery that I can do, and I take a lot of pride and effort in putting on a good game board. It's one of the things that attracted me as a kid to miniature wargaming, was the scenery, the terrain, and all that mini stuff. It was just so freaking cool. But anyway, thanks for joining me. My review for DBA.